They say war is a game of generals. But in 1941, the Axis tyrants forgot to check the scoreboard of the factory floor. This is the untold story of how the Axis misjudged American industrial dominance, and why that single mistake cost them the world. While the totalitarian thugs in Berlin and Tokyo were busy bullying their neighbors, they accidentally woke up a sleeping giant with a sledgehammer made of pure American iron. These arrogant aggressors actually believed Americans were too soft to fight. They were dead wrong. While the Axis butchers thought they were winning, a secret industrial avalanche was starting in the heart of the USA that would eventually bury their armies under a mountain of steel. But there was one specific manufacturing secret, a hidden breakthrough in the Midwest, that terrified the German High Command more than any bomb. What was the exact moment the Axis tyrants realized they had already lost the war, before the first American soldier even landed? Berlin, February 1940. The German High Command's war diary, the Kriegstagebuch, carries a line scribbled by an officer who has just reviewed American industrial statistics. Die amerikanische Kriegsproduktion ist für das neue Kriegsjahr kaum von Bedeutung. American war production, he writes, is of little significance for the coming year. The staff in Berlin see the United States not as a rival, but as a distant, distracted merchant, commercial, non-militarized in their own words, whose factories build refrigerators and cars, not tanks or bombers. In Tokyo, the same logic runs through secret cables. Japanese naval intelligence, poring over American newspapers and economic reports, warns that the United States, though rich in raw material, possesses a soft public opinion that will not sustain a total war effort. Detroit's auto plants, Japanese analysts claim, can only be redirected with extreme coercion. The idea that a democracy could outproduce an empire is dismissed as fantasy. German and Japanese staff reports, stamped and filed in the winter of 1940 and spring of 1941, echo with this confidence. The Abwehr Memo NR 2341 from March 1941 concludes that the United States will not be able to outproduce the Reich before 1944. Their models, built on pre-war export numbers and news clippings, predict delays, bottlenecks, and a lack of central direction. The American people, they argue, will tire quickly if forced into a long conflict. The language is cold and clinical, but the arrogance is unmistakable. The United States is written off as a land of consumers, not warriors. The phrase, commercial non-militarized, appears again and again in staff memos. The German Army's own intelligence bulletins claim that United States aircraft production is limited to a few hundred units per month, insufficient for a sustained strategic air campaign. Inside these war rooms, the Axis powers build their strategy on a single, brittle assumption that America is too soft, too slow, too divided to ever become a true enemy. No one in these reports imagines a nation that could turn car plants into bomber factories or housewives into welders. No one sees the avalanche coming. Only a lone Japanese admiral, soon to be at odds with his own government, dares to question the consensus. For now, the Axis is locked in its own echo chamber, blind to the storm building across the ocean. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, alone among the Axis High Command, saw the storm on the horizon. In private, he warned that striking the United States would not cripple, but awaken, a force beyond calculation. His words, delivered in a Japanese Navy communique on December 8, 1941, reverberated with a clarity that still stings. We have awakened a sleeping giant. The phrase, printed in the New York Times just days later, was no accident. Yamamoto had studied at Harvard, toured Detroit's endless assembly lines, and watched auto plants churn out Fords and Chevrolets by the minute. He understood what others in Tokyo and Berlin refused to see, that American factories were not fixed monuments, but living machines ready to be turned loose. In a classified directive, JMDA 1941-08, Yamamoto cautioned his peers that Detroit's automobile factories could, if ordered, be converted to produce fighters and armored vehicles in a matter of weeks. He described the American system as one that could supply large numbers of war machines in a short period, a warning that landed with a thud among staff officers who still believed in the myth of American softness. Yamamoto's fear was not of American resolve, but of American speed. He had seen the auto lines, the conveyor belts, the endless rows of workers who could build a car in under an hour. He imagined those same lines stamping out bombers and tanks day and night until the world itself shook. His caution fell on deaf ears. The Japanese high command, locked in the old logic of battleships and Bushido, dismissed his estimates. German analysts too scoffed at the idea that American housewives and mechanics could outproduce the Reich's best engineers. But Yamamoto's alarm was not just a private anxiety. In staff meetings, he pressed the point. The Americans can turn their factories into arsenals. Their auto plants are not a weakness, but a weapon. History would prove him right. But in the winter of 1941, he was a voice in the wilderness, drowned out by the chorus of overconfidence. The rest of the Axis clung to their illusions, blind to the fact that the American sledgehammer was already stirring, ready to fall. The Willow Run plant was an answer to every Axis sneer about American softness. Henry Ford's engineers took the moving assembly line, the same one that once churned out Model Ts, and retooled it to build the B-24 Liberator bomber. They didn't just copy old methods, they shattered them. The plant stretched a mile end to end, a concrete and steel artery where raw aluminum entered at one door, and every 63 minutes, a finished bomber rolled out the other. The numbers are not legend, they are logged, stamped, and signed. On July 12, 1944, the daily production sheet at Willow Run recorded a Liberator completed at 1:42 p.m., exactly 63 minutes after the last. This wasn't a lucky day. By 1944, Willow Run was turning out 24 to 27 bombers every single day, 3 shifts running, no pause for night or weekend. Over 8,685 B-24s left that line before the war ended. Ford's team broke the aircraft into hundreds of interchangeable parts, each built by a different supplier and delivered by rail straight to the plant floor. The assembly line moved like a living organism, wings, engines, and turrets snapping into place with a precision the Luftwaffe could only dream of. Every worker, from veteran machinist to a woman welding her first seam, was a cog in this relentless machine. The engineers didn't just build planes, they built a rhythm of destruction. Each hour, another sledgehammer for the skies. The Axis imagined American factories as slow, fragmented, incapable of war. Willow Run was the proof. The United States could turn out bombers faster than the Reich could shoot them down. This was the cadence of defeat, measured not in battles, but in minutes. Henry Kaiser did not wait for the enemy to understand what was coming. He built it. The Liberty ship program was his answer to every Axis prediction of American slowness. In the West Coast shipyards, Kaiser's crews turned a 14,000-ton steel hull into a working cargo ship faster than any navy in the world could comprehend. The most famous case, the SS Robert E. Peary, left the slipway after just 4 days of welding, a record set in November 1942. That number was not a fluke or a publicity stunt. It was a demonstration, broadcast in steel and fire, that American industry could move at a speed the Axis called impossible. Kaiser's method was simple and brutal. Break each ship into 2,500 modular sections, weld them instead of riveting, and feed the pieces down concrete slipways 24 hours a day. The average Liberty ship still took 42 days to build by 1944, but that was down from over 200 days before the war. In the final tally, 2,710 Liberty ships poured from American yards, enough to replace every Allied merchant lost, and then some. German U-boats could not sink ships faster than Kaiser could build them. Japanese planners, watching from across the Pacific, saw only numbers on a page. They never saw the pace, the relentless grinding rhythm of the American sledgehammer. The Robert E. Peary's record was more than a headline. It was proof that the United States could erase logistical losses overnight. Every new ship meant another convoy, another flood of tanks, trucks, and food for the front. Axis leaders, locked in their own propaganda, could not grasp that the war was being decided not in the field, but in the roar of the American shipyard. The War Production Board became the conductor of a national orchestra, pulling every lever of American industry into a single, unstoppable machine. By 1944, the United States had produced nearly 300,000 military aircraft, fighters, bombers, and transports, enough to fill the skies over 2 continents. Steel poured from American mills at a rate of 83 million tons a year. That is more steel than Germany and Japan combined could hope to forge, and every ton was shaped into tanks, guns, and the hulls of Liberty ships rolling out of Kaiser's yards. Oil wells across Texas and Oklahoma pumped 78 million barrels a day, fueling not just the tanks and trucks of the United States Army, but the engines of every allied nation. Coal mines delivered 380 million tons, keeping the furnaces burning day and night. The scale is almost beyond belief. One Willow Run plant could outproduce entire Axis aircraft industries. But this was only a piece of the avalanche. Hundreds of factories, from New England to California, followed War Production Board directives, like Directive 75-4, retooling auto lines, refrigerator plants, and even toy makers to deliver the parts of war. Every railroad, every river barge, every truck was drafted into the supply chain. The numbers are not just statistics, they are the evidence of a system working at full violence, a system the Axis never understood. The War Production Board's annual tables read like a drumbeat: 24,000 tanks in a year, 2,700 Liberty ships, millions of rifles, billions of rounds. The American sledgehammer did not swing in one place. It fell everywhere, all at once, until the enemy's numbers simply vanished under its weight. Midway was supposed to be the moment the Japanese fleet broke the back of American naval power. Instead, it became the first public reckoning with the American sledgehammer. The battle cost the United States Navy dearly, over 150 carrier aircraft lost in just 3 days, and a full 2/3 of the air groups on the front line. Axis planners saw those losses as a fatal wound, but they had never seen the American repair crews work through the night, or the railroad convoys loaded with fresh Dauntlesses and Wildcats rolling west from the factories. The real shock came not at sea, but in the numbers. Within 60 days, barely 2 months, every lost carrier plane had been replaced. The Bureau of Aeronautics did not just fill the gaps, they refilled the hangars, restocked the spare parts, and rotated in new pilots, all before the Japanese could even finish their post-battle reports. The replacement pipeline ran straight from the Willow Run assembly lines, where a new bomber rolled out every 63 minutes, to the Pacific docks, where crated aircraft waited for the next convoy. Navy logisticians had built a system that could absorb a disaster, erase it, and come back stronger. The Japanese believed a single carrier lost would cripple an American task force for a year. Instead, the United States carrier fleet returned to full strength before the summer was out. German analysts, reading intercepted American production logs, scribbled frantic revisions into their forecasts that carrier aircraft pool would be replenished in 60 days. The idea was unthinkable in Berlin, where a lost squadron might take 6 months to rebuild. This was not just resilience, it was elasticity. American industry bent, snapped back, and hit harder than before. The Axis had gambled on a war of attrition, but the reality was a war of replacement. At Midway, the myth of American softness died under the weight of a logistics machine that could turn defeat into fresh steel and new wings faster than any enemy could imagine. The beaches of Normandy became the raw stage for the American sledgehammer. On June 6, 1944, 30 United States landing ship tank vessels, called LST vessels, drove straight onto the sand, steel hulls gaping open. Each one carried tanks, trucks, and men, disgorging over 4,000 tons of armor and supplies in the first hours. The German High Command had never seen anything like this. Their intelligence had warned of a trickle, not a flood. But the flood came anyway, and it did not stop. Behind the front lines, the Quartermaster Corps worked without sleep. Dock crews in England loaded cargo night and day, pushing the limits of every crane and winch. Army truck drivers, many barely out of high school, climbed into convoys that stretched for miles. They called it the Red Ball Express. It was a rolling artery pumping 12,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, and food every single day from the channel ports to the front. Every crate, every drum, every ration tin had crossed the Atlantic on a Liberty ship, then landed in the jaws of an LST. July 1944 brought the next wave. 1,200 Sherman tanks thundered off the ramps in a single month. German officers, reading intercepted radio chatter, scribbled desperate notes saying enemy armor was endless. The numbers told the story. The Red Ball Express ran around the clock, logging over 5 million miles in 90 days. Quartermaster drivers slept on cots beside their trucks, boots still on. American logistics did not pause for weather, for shell fire, or for the enemy's disbelief. The Axis had imagined the invasion would choke on its own supply lines. Instead, they watched as the American industrial avalanche rolled over hedgerows and villages, turning every mile of French road into a moving factory floor. Normandy was not won by tactics alone. It was won by the violence of numbers, by a supply chain that made defeat for the Reich a matter of time, not chance. Captured diaries and interrogation transcripts from the final year of the war read like confessions. In the bunker beneath Berlin, German generals sat with Allied officers, stripped of their rank and their illusions. The tone of their notes shifted from arrogance to resignation. General Franz Halder's war diary, seized by American forces and logged at the Bundesarchiv, spells it out in plain German. The United States is now, prima facie, an industrial superpower. The words are heavy, almost reluctant. These were men who once scoffed at American assembly lines, now forced to admit that their own factories lay in ruins while Willow Run and the River Rouge still thundered day and night. Interrogators pressed for details. How had the Reich so badly misjudged? Halder and his peers pointed to the numbers: aircraft, tanks, Liberty ships, rolling from American plants in waves no European nation could match. In one transcript, a captured staff officer describes the Allied supply lines as an iron river, impossible to dam. Another simply wrote that they could not destroy what the Americans could replace. The psychological collapse is clear in these pages. The myth of American softness, repeated so often in Axis war rooms, withered in the face of endless steel and relentless logistics. The generals who once dismissed the United States as a nation of shopkeepers now confessed, line by line, that they had been erased by a force they never understood, a force measured not in divisions, but in tons, barrels, and bombers per minute. The Manhattan Project was not just a secret laboratory. It was the final, thunderous proof that American industry and science could do what no dictatorship could even attempt. In the hills of Tennessee, at Oak Ridge, over 1,000 Calitrons, giant electromagnetic machines, each the size of a city bus, hummed day and night, extracting uranium by the ounce from tons of ore. The Y-12 plant alone swallowed more copper than the entire pre-war German telephone network. Its wires were rerouted from the U.S. Treasury's silver vaults when copper ran short. At Hanford, in the remote reaches of Washington, reactors bred the world's first industrial-scale plutonium. The first full batch, finished in February 1945, was measured not in grams, but in pounds. Enough to build a weapon that could level a city. The numbers are staggering. Over 125,000 workers, engineers, physicists, machinists, welders, labored in total secrecy, building a supply chain that stretched from mines in Colorado to assembly sheds in New Mexico. More than $2 billion poured through the project, a river of money and material that dwarfed the entire annual budget of pre-war Japan. No Axis leader, no German or Japanese planner imagined a nation could mobilize such resources in silence, or that a democracy could outpace every totalitarian system at the most technical, most destructive edge of war. The bomb was not just a weapon, it was the full force of the American sledgehammer, made visible in a single flash. The war ended because the enemy finally saw, too late, the true scale of what they had refused to believe. The Axis bet everything against a nation they called soft, and were pulverized by an American sledgehammer that forged a bomber every hour and a ship every day. That industrial avalanche shattered tyranny, not just armies. Today, the silent factory is quieter. The question is, if darkness rises again, is that arsenal still waiting to wake? History warns, never underestimate a sleeping giant. Share your thoughts below.